Good morning, Sam. How are you?
Sam, global warming, your thoughts.
Sam, the Miller Report, your thoughts.
Good morning, boys. I'm going light today, huh? I see. That's good.
Yeah. You know, Kevin Durant dismisses the idea he's being frustrated by Patrick Beverley saying, you know who I am. Y'all know who I am. Are Durant's comments a big deal or no big deal?
We're going big deal, no big deal.
Sorry, I'm reading First Take. I'm reading First Take right now. It's on the TV. That's what they have. I don't
Gotcha.
know. Yeah.
Gotcha. You know what I somehow missed on that until a couple months ago. And apologies. You gotta like spirit me into motion here, buddy, because the coffee hasn't hit the veins yet.
Sure.
But they, Monty Poole at NBC Sports Bay Area had written a piece off of that, and so much focus on Kevin and his comments. I did not pick up on the fact yesterday that Steve Kerr, had said kind of the exact opposite. So, NBC's headline essentially said that Steve Kerr and Kevin Durant at odds over how much Kevin should shoot.
Yeah.
Which makes it all even more interesting. Like, Steve coming out and talking about 20, 30 shots. And I thought, independent of everything else, Kevin's commentary was awesome. Like, it sounds like a weird example, but it was like watching an incredible musician talk about a song, watching a basketball player talk about what he does. Like, he pulled the curtain back on how his mind works, how smart he is at this game. That part was cool. But then it's like, all right, how do you reconcile that? The fact that another smart basketball guy sees it differently and wants you to do something different. So, that makes tonight, I think, even more interesting.
Speaking of tonight, and also speaking of obviously coming off that huge blown lead, how did you, and I mean you, Sam Amick, how do you cover Draymond Green's mother or the parent of a player? I ask, and let me catch the audience up on this. She Did
she come at me again?
No, I'm sorry. No. That's not what I was. I totally forgot about that. That's not what I was referring to. I was referring to after the game, her making comments on rotations, on the game, on the team. I mean, she was very, very vocal, Kyle.
Do you know why I have to learn this from you? Because she blocked me.
No.
Like 4 years ago because she followed me.
Uh-huh.
And I just tweeted randomly.
Hold on. I'm Kyle. And
I know. I'm naming my next cat Dre Meow Green.
Right.
And she responded and said, "Stop worshiping man," and then blocked me.
First off,
she talking about Dave?
and Kyle, you've brought this up before. Her Twitter handle is Babers Green, and it should very well be what, Kyle? What should her Draymond Green? Come on.
Oh, Draymond Green, yes, of course.
So how do you cover parent? Is it newsworthy? Do you kind of blow it off? What are the rules there for you personally?
I'm not the right guy to ask because I have the luxury. When you don't cover just one team, mm-hmm. you certainly do not feel, which, as you guys know, is, the title-wise beat writer versus national writer.
Sure.
Is you don't have the pressure to cover every last part of that team. So I can overlook all that stuff. I don't even know. I mean, if I put my beat writing hat back on, first of all, I didn't have that kind of component when I was on the beat because, we're getting old.
Right.
And that didn't exist. That would be the equivalent of, there wasn't a social media thing, but, and I don't even know if this comparison is great, but like Kevin Martin, when he got upset with Reggie Theus about a quote he had in the paper, and then Kevin calls and decides to say something like, well, of course you're going to quote him. That's the actual player. Now you've got the social media stuff. Like one example recently that I thought was fair was that the Bee and others had highlighted, Marvin Bagley's father saying a few things on Instagram about, calling Dave Yeager yogurt and, being kind of condescending about, I mean, it reaches a point where that's fair game, but you also can't react to every single thing. So I don't know what the answer is. With Mary, I do think that when she first started tweeting, it was a story almost every single time years ago. And unofficially and within the media circles, I think the bar has been kind of moved in terms of when we decide to highlight what she says. But right now, you got Durant's free agency that is looming. A lot of questions about how Kevin's teammates truly look at him, think about him in the moment. And so that's where she's going to need to stay off Twitter if she doesn't want to cause headlines, because right now it's so kind of tense that I think, she's going to become part of the story.
Sam Amick joining us. Sam, when you were last on with us, boy, what a day that was. Vlade's extension breaks at 6:05. You were on with us and had to go break the news about Brandon Williams being let go by the Kings, and by the end of the hour, it broke that Dave Yeager was let go by the Kings. That was a whirlwind day for you, I'm sure. We haven't spoken since then, and we were obviously speaking of and guessing right on all three moves. Now that you've had a week to kind of let it sink in, and as you, by the way, audience, it also has to cover all the other teams as well. Your thoughts on Vlade, the swiftness of the moves, and where the Kings are at right now going into the summer?
I like the move. The Kings, to their credit, did at least for me, a very good job PR-wise of kind of explaining interpersonal dynamics, and stuff that reconciles and jives with everything I've learned on the other side as well. Because you got to be fair. These jobs are tricky from that sense where coach gets fired, and then a lot of times, reporting-wise, you got to be careful not to just take the narrative that is, kind of in his wake. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. From the team that jettisoned him. But I mean, it's Dave did a wonderful job last year, but the personal stuff got messy near the end, and it became a thing where in today's NBA you obviously can't. I just don't think you can bring him back as a lame duck coach. He had 1 year left on his deal. You got to either extend him and really be all in, or you got to part ways. And that's why the decision came to a head. But to be able to get a guy in Luke Walton, who Vlade has so much history with, who I think is going to continue to become a better coach. That's one thing we don't really focus on all that much in terms of just the real practice and the art of coaching. Luke has his strong suits, and he'll be the first to tell you that he's only getting better. And there are scouts that kind of question different things he does, and and I think that part of the game is going to improve for him. But this locker room and this group is, I think, a much, much better fit for what he wants to do and his timeline as it relates to their timeline. Young guys, similar to the Lakers' young core that he had brought along pretty well down there, and then without kind of that monstrous presence of LeBron James and everything that comes with it. I think they did a pretty nice job.
Sam Amick of The Athletic joining us. And obviously the Kings want to be classy and deferential towards Coach Yeager. He did do a good job. He did put this team in the right direction. But a lot of fans have been asking the same questions. Hey, if he hit 39 wins, and that's most wins this team has won in forever, and developing players, this team's had a reputation of not being able to do that. And you look at Fox and Bagley and Giles and so many of the players that are now actually developing. Why the heck was Dave fired? And you went into it a little bit, but ultimately, when you come down to it, why was a guy who won 39 games for this team let go?
I just think this song keeps playing in my head every time I get asked that similar question. Again, showing my age. The old Billy Joel, "It's a Matter of Trust."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's trust is huge in pro sports, but I happen to cover hoops, and the more I cover it, the longer I cover the NBA, the more I learn about how it's like, man, if I was running a team, I'm not saying that, it's one of, dozens and dozens of factors, but if you don't have trust, then it kind of erodes the foundation of what I think you are able to accomplish together. I talked to a GM yesterday who's had a ton of success in this league about this concept and this idea, and was almost kind of testing it on him, and he agreed wholeheartedly that the second that you start to not have that sort of synergy between the front office, between the coach and the players, those are just the four levels: ownership, front office, coach, players. And with Dave, it seems abundantly clear that there was some erosion of the trust in the locker room and players questioning, their careers in relation to kind of the way he did his job. And then you had it going kind of sideways in the other direction as well with Dave and Vlade. And so for all the focus on Brandon Williams and the drama of, what happened between he and Dave early in the season, the Vlade stuff was kept a little more quiet. But I've had, a ton of people corroborate it even outside the organization at this point that there were, pretty strong signs that those two were not simpatico. And this is a longer conversation, but you can even go back to Dave. You and I talked about this at the time. I mean, you go back to when they hired Dave.
Yep.
I had major questions. I mean, in hindsight, we talk PR. I would look at that and say, all right, don't blow smoke at the media, because at the time they tried to 100% say that was Vlade's pick, and it wasn't. Mike Woodson and Patrick Ewing were top of his list, and next thing you know, Dave Yeager became available, and he was the guy. And I mean, Vlade at the time stood by it, not once on or off the record, even background anything. Like, did he ever say, I didn't want this? So none of this has come from him, but it's just that element is important too. Like, they were working together and trying to do as good a work as possible, but it's not like the Vlade Luke thing when it comes to like the GM saying, this is the dude that I want to run our team.
Sam, I gotta follow up on that, and I completely understand that this is sensitive, especially on background. But this is another time that we've heard and fans have heard, and their ears perk up, that Dave Yeager was not Vlade Divac's pick. Are you comfortable at all in going into what you base that on?
The timeline would be the biggest thing. So I'm I forget, I was on the road. I was like in Dallas or something, and I've been given a strong indication that there was going to be a more methodical process. Remember they talked obviously for a bunch of people, or to a bunch of people, but then once they became available, everything got accelerated. And even with that being said, was given the indication at the time that despite some reports that had already leaked that Dave was being pegged as the front runner and likely the coach, that there was going to be some, I was going to say dragging of the feet, but that's not it. It was just that these other guys would really get strong consideration. Sure. And then it was a wrap. Like, it was like, just from that, like, no, if we weren't lying to you, it's going to be a process, to he's the coach. And, I don't want to get into the details, sure, but some of the stories that floated about, listen, the elephant in the room is that Vivek Ranadive, like a lot of owners in the NBA, like a lot of coaches, like a lot of GMs, has had to learn how to be an owner. Right. And I will give him credit right now, because it appears that he has started to have more confidence in his people, started to realize his own blind spots, if you will, and not have that kind of Silicon Valley mentality where you're going to have your fingerprints on every single thing. Because, as much as you might like the game as a basketball fan, you don't know the game like these dudes. You just don't. Right. And, and that part has evolved. And at the time, there's other stuff in this conversation too. There's power and politics in the NBA. So when a guy of Dave Yeager's, credentials becomes available, and this is, I think, fair to share, like, his agent, Warren Legary, is one of the most powerful men in the NBA. Yep. And so, if Warren's, I know he's good at his job. So at the time, I guarantee you, Warren was pushing hard, saying, this is the only coach for you guys. This is the guy. And so that's a lot to navigate for a relatively inexperienced group, at the time, with Vivek still being somewhat fresh, and Martina Kolokotronis, finding her place in the whole thing. And she had a ton to do with Vlade coming to town. So no secret, they all work together. But it's changed, and I do think it's evolved in these past couple of years.
Sam Amick of The Athletic with us. Sam, what do you think, best guess, of course it's a guess, but what do you think the future holds for Dave Yeager as we close the book on him and his time with Sacramento? Do you see him on a bench next year? Is he going to have to go the assistant route, college route, or is he going to be able to get back on an NBA bench sooner rather than later, in your opinion?
I mean, at face value, I'd say NBA bench. Mm-hmm. He's a very good coach, and he's got a good reputation. And this is a good thing to have on your resume to get this Kings team, 12 more wins this year than last year. And it's also, the Kings still have enough stink on them organizationally, league-wide, in terms of perception, that he will be able to also, fair or not, he will be able to blame some of this on perceived dysfunction. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And kind of wipe his hands of it as he attempts to get other jobs. I'd be surprised if he did that this year. Although the Minnesota thing, that seems like it's a wrap. But I mean, my sense had been that he would maybe do some media work, reconnect with his daughters, and who are on the other side of the country. And that's from a personal standpoint. Sure. I think I'm happy for him that he's going to have the time to do that. So I think it'll most likely be a low-key year with some media stuff, and then he'll probably be back in the running for whatever openings are there next year. That being said, I don't have the latest intel on the Cleveland and Memphis openings right now. I would be surprised if he was going for it, but I think probably next year he becomes one of the bigger names.
And lastly, Sam Amick joins us. Sam Amick from The Athletic, and we'll go ahead and plug where he's at and how you can be a part of all the amazing writing that goes on over there as far as a reader goes. Luke Walton, and we'll talk about this more throughout the summer. Sam, I've said it over and over again. People say, is Luke Walton a good coach? And my answer is, I don't know. I don't know if it's Luke is 35-4 with the Warriors in a very tough situation with egos and pressure and championships, or Luke in Los Angeles who was completely not supported and did not do too well with the best player on earth. And I know that narrative is unfair. Where do you fall as far as your opinion of him as a coach?
I think, well, again, first of all, I'm not, you have this is a weird way to preface it. You have all kinds of different reporters. I've never, professed to be a hard X's and O's guy. So I'm not going to sit here and break down the tactical side. I know his reputation. Reputation is that his number one strength is being a good human and being the kind of person who is trustworthy and can connect with players and who has had such a fascinating, resume fabric, if that makes sense, from, Phil Jackson to Kobe Bryant to Bill Walton to, all of these titans of the game that he has been around. Even the experience now with LeBron, learning, I'm sure, something from him along the way. Championship experiences, being in those locker rooms, that stuff is huge. And it's just something that most coaches do not bring to the table. So I think that, and by the way, it's Steve Kerr. I left him out. I mean, being around Steve is valuable. And so now I think to start with that and continue to build on the tactical side of kind of your acumen is a whole lot easier than going the other way, because in a way it's the polar opposite of Dave. Dave is a guy who grinded it out in the D League and, had rosters that were changing every single night and certainly didn't work with the types of basketball titans that Luke has. And so, I think he'll be good. It's just a question, I'm curious to see. I mean, full disclosure, the little negative stuff that I've gotten about Luke's coaching ability, I've filtered it out a little bit because most of the time it was coming from people who had a vested interest in seeing him not get this job.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that's the politics of the game. People who maybe might have had a crack at getting the job themselves or things of that nature. So we'll see. But, he has a ton of respect from some people in LA still. And I think it's also worth highlighting in terms of what kind of guy he is, that I was told, definitively that way down the line, wherever his career takes him, that bridge, this is not said to somehow make Kings fans worry about losing this coach. I'm talking way down the line. The bridge with the Lakers was not burned. And for that to be the case, considering everything that happened, it's just that idea that Jeannie Buss, their owner, still holds him in such high regard that, this was not a case of a guy getting exiled. And I do truly believe that he could have stayed there if he wanted to, based on my information. So, that speaks well of him, considering what a circus was down there.
Sam Amick writes for The Athletic, along with so many other talented writers. You can check him out at theathletic.com. Very simple. Just click NBA, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see all of your favorite writers. His latest, The Comeback, Patrick Beverley and friends beating the Golden State Warriors, and Sam is on the beat for that. And also, even though he covers all the teams, generally with the latest that goes on here in Sacramento, and we enjoy talking to him each and every Thursday. Wow, Sam, that was like a serious interview. Jeez, I've got to... You were going 60 Minutes style on me, trying to push me to say stuff. I'm going to get phone calls now, man.
Quick,
come on.
I know.
Quick, Sam, call Dave Fat.
No Kissy poker player build references today. Yeah. I will say, since you're always so kind to our athletic brand, Dave, shameless plug, in about 30 seconds I'll be publishing what was a really enjoyable conversation with the great Jerry West. So be on the lookout for that.
Very cool. Coming up on theathletic.com. That is an absolute blast when you get to talk to the logo and share that with everybody. And by the way, month subscription to The Athletic, less than a drink at your favorite bar. That's how cheap it is to get some of the best writing, period, end of statement, and a phenomenal layout on the app as well. Sam, thank you, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Drive.